I haven't lived in a city for 3 years. I moved back to the suburbs, back to a place where houses have lawns and neighbors wave, specifically because I couldn't handle the feeling of being watched anymore. People tell me I have PTSD. I tell them I have a survival instinct. Even now, sitting in a coffee shop in broad daylight writing this, I'm sitting with my back to the wall. I need to see the door. I need to know who is coming in and out. It started 5 years ago. I was 23, fresh out of a messy breakup and desperate for a place that didn't cost my entire paycheck. In this city, affordable usually means rat-infested or unsafe. So when I found the listing for the apartment on 4th Street, I thought it was a typo. The rent was $400 under market value. The photos showed hardwood floors, high ceilings, and decent natural light. I called the number, expecting a scam, but a man named Mr. Hessian answered on the second ring. Unit 4B. Yes, it's available. Can you come now? He had asked. Not, can you come later or tomorrow? Now. I met him at the building 20 minutes later. It was a brick pre-war structure, the kind with gargoyles near the roof and a heavy iron front door. Mr. Hessian was a small, nervous man who smelled faintly of mothballs and cheap cologne. He was sweating, despite it being a crisp October afternoon. "It's a quiet building," he said, practically jogging up the 3 flights of stairs. "Mostly older folks, no parties. We like it quiet." When he unlocked the door to 4B, I was stunned. It was huge. The living room had bay windows. The kitchen, while dated, was clean, but it was the silence that hit me first. The street noise faded away the moment the door clicked shut. It felt like a vault. I walked through the rooms, trying to find the catch. The layout was eccentric. The hallway curved unnecessarily, creating strange angles. The bedroom was at the back, windowless save for a small skylight, which explained the low price. But then I noticed the wall. The wall shared by the bedroom and the main building hallway seemed incredibly thick. When I tapped on it, it didn't sound like drywall. It sounded dense, layered. "Old chimney chase," Hessian said quickly, appearing in the doorway behind me. I jumped. I hadn't heard him approach. "Takes up space, but keeps the place warm in winter. Very warm." He was staring at me, his eyes wide, a plastic smile plastered on his face. He was wringing his hands together.
"I'll take it," I said. I was desperate. I ignored the gut feeling that told me his eagerness was unnatural. I ignored the way he didn't even ask for a credit check, just the first month's rent in cash. Move-in day was a blur of cardboard and sweat. My friends, Dave and Sarah, helped me haul my mattress up the stairs. We ordered pizza, drank cheap beer, and laughed about how I'd won the lottery with this apartment. "It's creepy, though," Sarah said, looking up at the ceiling in the bedroom. "That vent is massive." She pointed to the grate high on the wall, right above where I had put the head of my bed. It was an industrial metal grate, painted over a dozen times, about 2 feet wide. "It's for the circulation," I said, repeating what Hessian had told me. "Old buildings need to breathe." "It looks like a prison sewer grate," Dave joked. We laughed, but when the laughter died down, the silence of the room rushed back in. By 10 p.m. they were gone. I locked the deadbolt, a brand new shiny lock that clashed with the chipped paint of the door, and turned around to face my new life. The isolation hit me instantly. Without the clutter of boxes and the noise of my friends, the apartment felt vast and heavy. I spent the next hour unpacking the essentials: sheets, toiletries, coffee maker. At around 11:30 p.m., I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth. The bathroom shared a wall with the living room. The faucet was running, but I turned it off to spit. That's when I heard it. Thump. It was soft, dull, like a heavy book being set down on a carpet. I froze, toothbrush hanging out of my mouth. I waited. The building was old, sounds carried. It was probably the neighbor upstairs walking around. Scrape. This sound was different. It was a friction sound, fabric against wood, and it didn't sound like it came from the ceiling. It sounded like it came from the living room. I spit the toothpaste out and walked into the hallway, my heart doing a nervous little flutter. "Hello?" I called out. I felt stupid immediately. The living room was empty. The boxes were stacked exactly where I left them. The windows were dark. I checked the front door, still locked, deadbolt engaged. "Get a grip," I whispered to myself. "Pipes. It's just pipes." I went back to the bedroom. I was exhausted. I climbed into bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin. The streetlights from the skylight cast a pale blue square onto the floor. I stared at it, willing myself to sleep. The silence was suffocating. In my old place, I could hear the hum of the city, sirens, cars, distant shouting. Here, the insulation was so thick I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I closed my eyes. Creak. My eyes snapped open. That wasn't the building settling. That was the distinct, high-pitched groan of a floorboard under pressure. It came from the hallway, just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, my entire body rigid. I listened for a footstep, a breath, anything, but there was nothing, just the oppressive silence. I lay there for an hour, staring at the open doorway, waiting for a shadow to move. It never did. Eventually, exhaustion won. I drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of walls that breathed and vents that watched. The next morning, the sun coming through the skylight made the fears of the night seem ridiculous. I made coffee and laughed at myself. First night jitters, I thought. Classic. I decided to do a deep clean of the place before unpacking the rest of my clothes. I started in the bedroom closet. It was a small, cedar-lined space that smelled of dust. I got a step stool to wipe down the top shelf, which was coated in a thick layer of grime. I ran a wet rag across the wood, turning it black with soot. I scrubbed harder, reaching into the back corner where the shelf met the wall. My fingers brushed against something that wasn't dust. It was jammed into the gap between the shelf and the molding, wedged tight as if someone didn't want it to be found. I worked it loose with my nail finger. It was a small, folded piece of paper, yellowed, brittle notebook paper. I climbed down from the stool and unfolded it. It wasn't a receipt or a list of groceries. It was a log, a list of dates and times, written in frantic, jagged handwriting. October 12th, 2:03 a.m., breathing again. October 14th, 11:15 p.m., my keys moved. I know I put them on the hook. October 15th, 3 a.m., he's in the walls. October 16th, don't sleep. The last entry was written so hard the pen had torn through the paper. I stood there in the sunny bedroom, the cold coffee in my hand suddenly forgotten, staring at the vent above my bed. For the first time, I noticed that two of the screws holding the grate place were missing, and the paint around the edge was chipped as if it had been removed recently. I stood there for a long time, staring at the crumpled piece of notebook paper until the yellow lines blurred together. He's in the walls. It was the kind of thing you read in a cheap paperback or see scrawled on a bathroom stall. It was theatrical. It was ridiculous. I crumpled the note up and tossed it into the trash bag I was using for dust bunnies. Meth, I whispered to the empty room. Definitely meth. That was the narrative I constructed to save my own sanity. The previous tenant wasn't a victim of some architectural horror. She was an addict who had a bad break with reality. It explained the frantic handwriting, the paranoia, the sudden departure. It explained why Mr. Hessian was so eager to get a normal tenant in. I grabbed a screwdriver from my toolkit and climbed up onto my bed. I wanted to secure the vent just for peace of mind.
I slotted the head of the driver into the loose screw and turned. It just spun. I tried the other missing screw hole, same thing. The wood behind the plaster was stripped smooth, as if that grate had been taken off and put back on hundreds of times. The metal felt cold and greasy under my fingers. I couldn't tighten it, so I just pushed the screws in to make it look flush, climbed down, and tried to ignore the gaping black rectangle hovering over my pillow. The next 3 days were a masterclass in self-deception. I went to work, I came home, I unpacked. I told myself I loved the apartment, I loved the rent, I loved the high ceilings. But the apartment didn't seem to love me back. It started with the temperature. It was late October and the nights were getting chilly. I set the old analog thermostat in the hallway to a comfortable 68 degrees before I left for work on Tuesday morning. When I came home at 6 p.m., the apartment was a sauna. The air was thick and dry, tasting of burnt dust. I checked the thermostat. The dial was cranked all the way over to 80. I stared at the little plastic needle. I must have bumped it, I thought. My bag must have snagged it on the way out. I turned it back down, opened a window, and blamed my own clumsiness. Wednesday morning, it was the milk. I am a creature of habit. I make coffee, I pour a splash of oat milk, and I put the carton back in the fridge door. I do this on autopilot. But when I came home that evening to make dinner, the carton of oat milk was sitting on the kitchen counter, warm and spoiled. I stood in the center of the kitchen, looking from the fridge to the counter. I felt a prickle of unease on the back of my neck. I knew I put it back. I could visualize the motion. Early onset dementia? The thought actually crossed my mind. Stress? Sleep deprivation? I threw the milk away, angry at myself. I was letting the spooky atmosphere of the building get to me. That night, I made sure to be hyper-aware of everything I did. I locked the door. I checked the windows. I turned the thermostat to 68. I put my keys in the small ceramic bowl by the door. I went to bed early, exhausted. Sleep in that apartment was never deep. It was a shallow, gray drift where I was always semi-conscious of the room around me. Around 2 a.m., I woke up. I didn't wake up with a start. I just floated up from sleep into wakefulness, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. The skylight was covered by clouds, so the room was pitch black. I lay there, listening. It was faint, rhythmic. Breathing. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It wasn't coming from the street. It sounded wet, heavy, and it was coming directly above my head. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would wake the neighbors. I stared up into the black void where the vent was. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the presence. The air pressure felt different. "Hello?" I whispered. My voice cracked. The rhythm stopped. Absolute silence followed. Not the silence of an empty room, but the held breath silence of a predator hoping the prey loses interest. I lay there for 10 minutes, paralyzed, clutching my duvet. Then, slowly, the rational part of my brain clawed its way back. "It's the wind," I told myself. "Drafts moving through the chimney chase, air pressure changes." I turned on the bedside lamp. The light flooded the room. The vent was just a vent. The grate was still there. Nothing looked disturbed. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I watched Netflix on my phone with headphones in, drowning out the silence until the sun came up. Thursday was when the fear turned into something else. I came home from work early, around 4 p.m. I unlocked the front door, deadbolt, bottom lock, and stepped inside. I dropped my bag and reached for the ceramic bowl to drop my keys. The bowl was empty. I froze. I patted my pockets. I checked my bag. I had my keys in my hand, obviously, because I had just unlocked the door, but my spare set. When I moved in, I had made a spare set of keys and put them in that bowl for emergencies, intending to give them to Sarah later. I hadn't touched them since move-in day. I tore the apartment apart. I checked the drawers, the floor, the kitchen counters, the bathroom vanity. I checked the trash. The spare keys were gone. Panic is a cold thing. It starts in your stomach and spreads to your fingertips. I sat on the couch, my hands shaking. I called Mr. Hessian. "Mr. Hessian, did you come into my apartment today?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What? No, of course not," he said, sounding annoyed. "I require 24 hours notice for entry. Is there a problem?" "My spare keys are missing." "Well, you probably misplaced them, son. Moving is chaotic. Check your pockets." "I didn't misplace them. They were in the bowl." "Look," his tone hardened, "I don't have time for this. If you lost your keys, that's on you. Change the locks if you're worried, but don't accuse me of entering your unit." He hung up. I sat there, feeling small and stupid. He was right, wasn't he? I was the one forgetting to put the milk away. I was the one bumping the thermostat. I was the one who probably dropped the keys in a box somewhere and forgot. I was gaslighting myself. It was easier to believe I was losing my mind than to believe someone had been in my apartment. I decided to go out. I needed fresh air. I needed to get away from the oppressive silence of 4B. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. As I reached for the knob, I looked down at my boots, which I had kicked off by the door when I came in 10 minutes ago. One boot was standing upright. The other was lying on its side, facing the opposite direction. And inside the upright boot, glinting in the dim hallway light, was my spare set of keys. I stared at them. I hadn't put them there. I hadn't even been near the boots since I took them off. I had walked straight to the couch to call Hessian. Someone had put them there. Recently. I spun around, my back to the door, facing the apartment. The living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. The hallway curved out of sight toward the bedroom. "Is someone here?" I yelled. I tried to sound aggressive, but I sounded terrified. Silence. Then, from the back of the apartment, from the direction of the bedroom, I heard a sound that made my blood turn to ice. It was the distinctive click-clack of the bathroom light switch being flicked on. A moment later, a thin sliver of yellow light spilled out from the hallway, cutting across the floorboards. I was the only one with a key. The door had been locked. I wasn't alone. I didn't stick around to ask who's there. I didn't grab a kitchen knife or try to play the hero. The moment that sliver of yellow light hit the floorboards, my fight-or-flight response made the decision for me. I turned the lock, threw the door open, and sprinted down the 3 flights of stairs so fast I nearly broke my neck. I burst out onto the sidewalk, gasping for air, the cold evening wind stinging my face. I ran across the street, putting a line of parked cars between me and the building, and stared up at my windows. They were dark. Wait. No. The bathroom window, a small frosted square of glass facing the alley, was glowing. I dialed 911. My hands were shaking so bad I hit the wrong button twice. "There's someone in my apartment," I stammered to the operator. "I'm outside. I saw the lights turn on." The police arrived 10 minutes later. It felt like 10 years. 2 officers, a man and a woman, pulled up in a cruiser with no lights or sirens. They looked tired. They looked like they had dealt with a dozen noise complaints and suspicious persons already that shift. "You saw an intruder?" the male officer asked, hitching up his belt. "I saw the light turn on," I corrected, feeling my credibility shrinking under his skeptical gaze. "And my keys were moved. Someone was in there." We went up together. They made me stand in the hallway while they cleared the unit. I listened to the heavy thud of their boots on my hardwood floors. I heard the bathroom door creak open. I heard the shower curtain rustle.
Clear. I stepped back inside. The apartment looked exactly as I had left it, except the bathroom light was now blazing, illuminating the white tile in the clawfoot tub. "There's nobody here, sir," the female officer said, holstering her flashlight. "We checked the closets, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Windows are all locked from the inside." "But the light," I insisted, pointing at the bathroom. "I was in the hallway. It clicked on. I heard the switch." The male officer walked into the bathroom and flicked the switch up and down. Click-clack, click-clack. "Old switches," he grunted, "or a short in the wiring. Vibrations from a truck outside could trip it if it's loose." "And my keys?" I asked. "They were in my boot." He gave me a look that was equal parts pity and annoyance. "Look, moving is stressful. People do weird things when they're tired. Unless you have signs of forced entry, a kicked door or a broken window, there's not much we can do about a light turning on." Just then, Mr. Hessian appeared in the open doorway. He was wearing a robe over his clothes, looking flustered and furious. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Police in my building?" Tenant thought he had a break-in, false alarm, probably faulty wiring in the bathroom switch. Hessian's eyes darted to me, then to the bathroom, then back to me. "Wiring, yes. The building is old. I've been meaning to update the electrical. I'll have a guy look at it tomorrow." He turned his glare on me. "Next time, call me before you bring the cops here. You're scaring the other tenants." They left. All of them. I stood alone in the center of the living room, feeling like a child who had cried wolf. The police thought I was crazy. Hessian thought I was a nuisance, and for a terrifying minute I wondered if they were right. Had I done it? Had I moved the keys in a fugue state? Did the switch just slip? I couldn't leave. I had just paid first, last in security. I had $40 in my bank account until payday. I had nowhere else to go. "Okay," I said aloud. The sound of my own voice was weak. "Okay, prove it."
I needed objective reality. I needed something that couldn't be gaslit, something that didn't rely on my memory or my perception. I set up a trap. I took my laptop and placed it on the dresser in the bedroom, angling it so the camera faced the bed and the wall with the large vent. I plugged it in so the battery wouldn't die. I opened the camera app and hit record. Then I turned the screen brightness all the way down and draped a black t-shirt over the keyboard, leaving just lens exposed. To anyone walking in, it would look like a closed, sleeping computer. I slept on the couch in the living room that night, fully dressed, with a hammer on the floor next to me. I didn't sleep, really. I dozed. Every creak of the floorboards made me grip the hammer handle until my knuckles turned white. I kept staring at the hallway darkness, waiting for a silhouette to detach itself from the shadows. But nothing happened. The night was quiet. When the sun finally came up, washing the apartment in gray morning light, I felt foolish again. The terror of the night before seemed melodramatic in the daylight. I walked into the bedroom. The air was stale. The laptop was still sitting on the dresser, exactly where I had left it. The red recording dot was still pulsing on the screen under the t-shirt. I stopped the recording. 8 hours of footage. I sat on the bed and scrubbed through the timeline. 11 p.m. Nothing, just the dark grain of the room. 1 a.m. Nothing. 2:30 a.m. Nothing. I was scrubbing fast, watching the timestamp fly by. My anxiety began to fade, replaced by a dull embarrassment. I was just paranoid. I stopped. At 3:42 a.m., the audio waveform on the editing track spiked.
I dragged the playhead back and turned the volume up. On the screen, the room was dark, lit only by the faint ambient glow of the city filtering through the skylight. It was hard to see details. Then sound. Scritch, scritch. It was metal on metal. I leaned in closer to the screen, squinting. High up on the wall, in the top right quadrant of the frame, the vent was moving. It wasn't swinging open, it was sliding. The screws I had tried to tighten, the ones that just spun in place, were fake. The entire grate was being lifted from the inside, pulled inward into the darkness of the wall cavity. A black hole appeared where the grate used to be. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then something pale emerged. It was a hand. It reached out, long and skeletal, fingers grasping the edge of the drywall. Then a forearm, then a head. The resolution was grainy, but I could see the outline. It was a person, a man. He was bald, or his hair was matted flat. He slithered out of the vent head first, moving with a disturbing fluid silence, like an insect exiting a hive. He dropped to the floor. He landed in a crouch, soundless. He stood up. He was tall, painfully thin, wearing what looked like dark, tight-fitting clothes. He stood at the foot of my bed, my empty bed, and just stared at it. He stood there for 5 full minutes. He didn't move. He just watched the empty pillows where my head should have been. Then he turned and looked directly at the dresser. My blood ran cold. He looked right at the camera lens. He took a step toward it. His face came into focus for a split second. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and reflecting the tiny LED light of the webcam. He wasn't scared. He looked curious. He reached out a hand toward the laptop. Then, abruptly, he stopped. He turned his head as if he heard something, maybe me shifting on the couch in the other room. Then he turned back to the vent. In 3 quick, athletic movements, he scrambled up the furniture, pulled himself back into the hole, and slid the grate back into place. The video returned to stillness. I sat there, on my bed, the morning sun warming my back, watching the footage on a loop. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgetful. I wasn't imagining things. I was roommates with a monster, and he knew I wasn't sleeping in my bed. I didn't scream. I didn't run. A strange, cold calm washed over me, the biological override of a brain entering survival mode. I closed the laptop, put it in my bag, and walked out of the bedroom. I moved slowly, deliberately, trying not to make a sound, even though every instinct screamed at me to bolt. I grabbed my keys and my wallet. I stood by the front door, my hand on the knob, trembling. Logic warred with panic. If I went to the police with a grainy, low-light video of a silhouette, what would they do? They'd come back, look at the vent, see nothing, and file a report. They wouldn't tear the walls down. They wouldn't find him unless he wanted to be found. I had seen how fast he moved. He was like a cockroach. Shine a light, and he scuttles into the cracks. I needed to know where he went. I needed to know how deep this went. And, God help me, I needed to know if he was in there right now. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight and the longest, sharpest carving knife I owned. I waited by the door for 10 minutes, listening. The apartment was silent. The building was silent. It was 11 a.m. on a Friday. Most people were at work. If he was a squatter, he might be out scavenging or sleeping. I walked back into the bedroom. The sun was high now, blasting through the skylight, making the room feel deceptively safe. I stared at the vent, the black mouth of the wall. I climbed onto the bed, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other. I gripped the metal grate. As the video had shown, the screws were just decoration. I pulled gently. The grate slid out with a soft rasp of metal on plaster. A smell hit me instantly. It wasn't the smell of dead rats or mold, though those were there too. It was the smell of a locker room that hadn't been cleaned in a decade. Sweat, stale breath, and something sharp and vinegary like urine. I clicked the flashlight on and aimed it into the hole. It wasn't just a chimney chase. It was a service void, a gap between the structural brick of the building and the interior plaster walls of the apartments. It was about 3 feet wide and stretched down into the darkness, seemingly all the way to the basement. But it wasn't empty. Directly inside the opening, a makeshift floor had been constructed using plywood boards wedged between the brick and the studs. It formed a small, cramped platform, maybe 4 feet long. A nest. I leaned in, fighting the urge to vomit. There was a sleeping bag, gray and matted with grime, rolled out on the plywood. Beside it was a stack of empty water bottles and food wrappers, my food wrappers, granola bar foils, an empty bag of chips I thought I had finished, an apple core that had turned brown and shriveled. He wasn't just raiding the fridge, he was taking leftovers and eating them 3 feet away from my head while I slept. I shimmied my torso into the hole, the plaster dust scraping my shoulders. I needed to see more. To the left of the sleeping bag, taped to the brickwork, was a gallery. It was a collection of Polaroids and printed photos, but they weren't of me. They were of the previous tenants. A woman brushing her hair, a couple eating dinner, a man sleeping on the same side of the bed I used. The angles were all high, all taken from above. I swung the flashlight beam around. That's when I saw the holes. Drilled into the plaster wall, the wall that separated this void from my apartment, were a 6 small holes, each no bigger than a dime. From the bedroom side, they probably looked like nail holes or imperfections in the old paint. From this side, they were viewing ports.
One looked directly down at the bed. One looked at the desk. One was angled toward the doorway. I pulled back, feeling violated in a way that made my skin crawl. It was an ecosystem of surveillance. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a habitat designed for a parasite. Then the beam of my flashlight caught something shiny resting on a small wooden ledge above the sleeping bag. It was a smartphone, not mine, an old, cracked Android model. It was plugged into a portable battery bank. I reached out and tapped the screen. It lit up. It was recording. The camera was positioned against one of the drill holes. On the screen, I saw a live feed of my bathroom, the shower curtain, the sink, the toilet. My stomach dropped. I realized where the hole must be, probably behind the medicine cabinet or in the molding near the ceiling. He wasn't just watching the bedroom, he had eyes everywhere. I went to grab the phone, thinking I could use it as evidence, but my hand froze. Below me, deep in the shaft, I heard a sound. Clang. It was the sound of a metal rung being stepped on. I angled the flashlight down into the abyss. The beam cut through the swirling dust motes. About 20 feet down, where the darkness was thickest, something pale was moving. A face looked up. It was him, the man from the video. Even in the harsh vertical light of the flashlight, his features were terrifyingly distinct. His skin was pasty, almost translucent, stretched tight over a skull that seemed too large for his face. His eyes were black pits, dilated in the darkness. He didn't blink. He didn't look surprised. He smiled. It was a jagged, broken-toothed grin that split his face open. "I can see your toes,"
A voice drifted up. It was raspy, dry, like sandpaper on stone. He lunged upward, grabbing a rusted rebar ladder that I hadn't noticed running along the brick wall. He moved with impossible speed, hand over hand, scrambling up the shaft like a spider. Climb, scrape, climb, scrape. He was coming for the vent. He was coming for me. I threw myself backward, tumbling out of the hole and onto my mattress. I scrambled back, kicking the sheets, dropping the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, the beam spinning wildly. I heard his hand slap the plywood platform inside the wall. He was right there. I lunged for the dresser, grabbed the heavy oak drawer I had pulled out earlier to organize clothes, and slammed it against the wall, covering the vent opening. It wasn't a seal, but it was a block. Thud. Something hit the drawer from the other side, hard. "Let me in," the voice whispered. It wasn't loud. It sounded intimate. It sounded like he was right beside my ear. We were just getting to know each other. I backed away, gripping the knife. The drawer shuddered as he pushed against it. The heavy oak dresser groaned, tipping slightly. He was strong, much stronger than he looked. I didn't wait to see if he could push it over. I turned and ran. I grabbed my bag from the hallway floor. I fumbled with the locks, my fingers slipping on the deadbolt. Behind me, I heard the crash of the dresser toppling over, followed by the metallic clang of the grate hitting the floor. I tore the door open and sprinted into the hallway. I didn't stop at the stairs. I didn't stop at the front door of the building. I ran until I was 3 blocks away, standing in the middle of a busy intersection, hyperventilating, clutching a carving knife in my pocket, while pedestrians stared at me like I was the maniac. I took my phone out to dial 911, my vision blurring with tears of panic. That's when I saw the notification on my screen. A text message received 1 minute ago from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo. It was a photo of the back of my head, taken from the ceiling vent, time-stamped just seconds before I had opened it. The text underneath read, "You didn't make the bed."
The police response was different this time. When you call 911 screaming that a man is in your walls and you have a knife, they don't send the tired patrol unit with the broken taillight. They send the cavalry. 3 cruisers screeched to a halt at the intersection where I was standing. I dropped the knife the moment I saw them, raising my hands, shivering violently. I must have looked insane. A 20-something guy in jeans and a t-shirt, no jacket, hyperventilating in the middle of the street while clutching a phone that contained a picture of the back of his own head. "He's in the wall," I choked out as an officer approached, hand on his holster. "Unit 4B, behind the dresser. He has a tunnel." They cuffed me first, standard procedure when a weapon is involved. But once they saw the text message on my phone, the mood shifted from caution to urgency. The officer, a sergeant named Miller, looked at the photo, then at my head, then back at the photo. His jaw tightened. "Keep him here," Miller barked to his partner. "We're going in, lethal force authorized if threatened." I sat in the back of the cruiser, the hard plastic seat digging into my spine, watching the building. I waited for gunshots. I waited for shouting. But there was only the static of the police radio and the indifferent flow of traffic passing by. 20 minutes later, Miller came back out. He wasn't holding a suspect. He looked pale. He walked over to the cruiser, opened the door, and uncuffed me. "You need to come upstairs, son." His voice had lost that authoritative edge. It sounded hollow. "We need you to identify some things." Walking back into the building was the hardest thing I've ever done. My body physically resisted every step. The staircase felt like the throat of a beast I was voluntarily climbing back into. When we entered 4B, the apartment was swarming with cops.
The bedroom door was off its hinges. They had kicked it in, not knowing it was unlocked. The heavy oak dresser I had tipped over was pushed aside. The vent grate was gone. The black hole in the wall was gaping wide like an open wound. "Watch your head," Miller said, gesturing for me to look inside. I didn't want to. I wanted to burn the building down, but I needed to see that he was gone. I leaned in. A floodlight had been set up inside the void, illuminating everything with a harsh, clinical glare. The sleeping bag was there. The food wrappers were there. But the man was gone. "He has a route," Miller pointed the beam of his flashlight upward. "Look." The brick shaft didn't just stop at the ceiling. The rebar ladder continued up, disappearing into the darkness of the 5th floor and down into the basement. But it wasn't just vertical. Someone had knocked out bricks to create crawl spaces moving horizontally, bridging into the adjacent walls. "It's a Warren," Miller muttered, disgust evident in his tone. "He's been moving between units. We found access panels cut into the drywall in 4A and the hallway closet." Then he shined the light on the directly opposite the sleeping bag, the back of my bedroom wall. I saw the drill holes. From this side, they were clearly visible. But what made me retch was the markings. Next to each hole, written in black marker on the plaster, were notes. Sleep, change, computer, and dates. A list of dates scrolled in columns. "He's been logging your schedule," Miller said quietly. "We found a notebook, too. He knew when you showered. He knew when you left for work. He knew you didn't have a gun."
I felt my knees give out. I leaned against the doorframe, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just a squatter. This was a study. I was the lab rat. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Gone," Miller said. "We're sweeping the basement and the roof, but this guy knows the building better than the architect. He could be 3 blocks away by now, or he could be in a wall cavity on the 1st floor waiting for us to leave." A commotion in the hallway drew our attention. Mr. Hessian was being escorted toward us by 2 officers. He wasn't shouting this time. He looked small, deflated, and terrifyingly sweaty. "I didn't know," Hessian was pleading, his hands shaking. "I swear, I thought it was rats. Tenants always complain about rats in the walls." "Mr. Hessian," Miller said, stepping out of the bedroom, "we found a power strip in the void, hardwired into the building's main line. We found a mattress that matches the inventory in your storage locker, and we found a set of master keys under the sleeping bag." Hessian's face went gray. I lost a set of keys months ago. I told you." "You rented me this place knowing something was wrong," I said, stepping toward him. Anger momentarily eclipsed my fear. "That's why it was so cheap. That's why you rushed me in. You knew someone was in here." "I suspected a squatter," Hessian squeaked. "I didn't know it was him. I just thought if I got a tenant in here, the activity would stop. I thought he'd leave if someone lived here." I stared at him horrified. "You used me as a scarecrow?" "I needed the rent," Hessian snapped, then immediately covered his mouth, realizing what he'd admitted. "Grab Hessian's arm," Miller said. "We're going to have a long talk downtown, Mr. Hessian. Negligence is the least of your problems right now." As they hauled the landlord away, Miller turned back to me. "Pack a bag. Get your essentials. Do not stay here tonight. Do you have somewhere to go?" "A hotel," I said. "I'll go to a hotel." "Good. We'll have a unit patrol the perimeter, but honestly, you should get as far away from this zip code as possible." I spent 10 minutes packing. I didn't fold anything. I threw clothes, my laptop, and my toiletries into a duffel bag. I didn't touch the food. I didn't touch the bedding. I just wanted out. I grabbed the ceramic bowl by the door, the one where the keys had been moved, and dumped it into the trash. As I was zipping up my bag, I noticed something on the coffee table. It was my spare set of keys,
the ones I had found in the boot. The police had dusted them for prints earlier, leaving a fine layer of black powder on the metal. But next to the keys was something else. A small, folded piece of paper. I hadn't put it there. The police hadn't put it there. They would have bagged it as evidence. My heart hammered against my ribs. I picked it up with the tips of my fingers. It was a page torn from a notepad. The handwriting was jagged, frantic, the same handwriting I had found in the closet on the first day, the handwriting of the addict previous tenant. But the ink was fresh. It was still wet. I unfolded it. I didn't leave because of the noise. I left because he told me to. He likes you better. I dropped the note. He hadn't left the building. He hadn't fled when the cops arrived. He had been here. While the police were in the bedroom, while I was in the cruiser, he had slipped out of a different hole, walked into my living room, left this note, and vanished again. He wasn't afraid of the police. He was mocking them. I grabbed my bag and ran. I didn't wait for the elevator. I didn't say goodbye to Miller. I sprinted to my car, jumped in, and locked all the doors. I drove. I didn't know where I was going, just away. I drove until the city skyline was a blur in my rearview mirror. I checked into a Motel 6 off the highway, 30 miles north. I got into the room, threw my bag on the floor, and barricaded the door with the heavy armchair. I closed the curtains. I checked the bathroom. I checked the space under the bed. I checked the vents. I sat on the bed, staring at the door, clutching my phone. Safe. I was safe. He couldn't follow me here. He didn't know where I was. I exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that turned into a sob. I wiped my eyes and unlocked my phone to call my mom. I needed to hear a familiar voice. But before I could dial, a notification popped up. New voicemail from unknown number. I stared at the screen. My hands were trembling so bad I almost dropped the phone. I pressed play. There was static, heavy, rhythmic breathing, the sound of wind rushing past a microphone. Then a voice, the same dry, raspy voice I had heard in the wall. "Nice room," the voice said, a low clacker vibrating through the speaker. "I like the armchair by the door. Smart move." I froze. "But you checked the vent," the voice continued, a low chuckle vibrating through the speaker. "You forgot to check the trunk of your car." I dropped the phone. It hit the cheap industrial carpet with a dull thud, but the voice seemed to linger in the air, echoing off the beige walls. Check the trunk. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt like they had filled with concrete. I stood in the center of the motel room, staring at the armchair I had jammed against the door. It was a barricade designed to keep out the world, but if he had been in my car, if I had driven 30 miles with him curled up in the darkness just a few feet behind my head, then the barricade was meaningless. I had brought the monster with me. "Nice room," he had said. That meant he could see me. Right now. I threw myself flat onto the floor. It was an instinctual reaction, avoiding the line of sight of the window. I crawled on my elbows and knees toward the heavy blackout curtains. There was a gap, a tiny vertical slit where the fabric didn't quite meet the wall. I reached up, my hand trembling uncontrollably, and pulled the edge of the curtain back just an inch. My car was parked directly in front of the room, bathed in the buzzing, flickering orange light of the motel sign. The trunk was open. The lid was raised all the way up, swaying slightly in the night wind. It looked like a gaping mouth screaming at the sky. And standing next to the car, leaning casually against the driver's side door, was a figure. It was him, the man from the video, the man from the wall. He was wearing my clothes. He had on a hoodie I thought I had lost in the move and a pair of my old jeans. He looked absurdly normal from a distance, like a traveler taking a smoke break. But he wasn't smoking. He was staring directly at my window. He was staring right at the gap in the curtains where my eye was. He raised a hand and gave a small, lazy wave. Then he pointed a finger at the motel lobby, a separate building about 50 yards across the parking lot. "Run," my brain screamed. "He's taunting you." I scrambled backward, away from the window. I grabbed the room phone, the corded landline on the nightstand. I dialed 0 for the front desk. Ring, ring, ring. "Front desk?" a gravelly voice answered. "I told you, call the police. There's a man outside my room. He's stalking me. 104. "Sir, if you're having a domestic dispute—" "It's not a dispute. Call 911. He's right outside." I slammed the receiver down. I didn't wait for the clerk to understand. I needed to move. If he was outside the window, the door was the only way out, but I had barricaded it. I grabbed the armchair and heaved it aside, the legs screeching against the floor. I unlocked the deadbolt and threw the door open, preparing to fight, to run, to do anything. The parking lot was empty. My car was still there, trunk open, orange light glinting off the roof. But the figure was gone. I didn't investigate. I didn't check the corners. I sprinted toward the lobby, my boots slapping hard against the asphalt. I ran like a child afraid of the dark, arms pumping, not looking back until I burst through the glass doors of the reception area. The night clerk, an older man with a thick gray mustache, jumped up from his stool, spilling coffee on his shirt. "Help me," I gasped, locking the door behind me and backing away from the glass. "He's out there."
The clerk looked at me, then out at the empty parking lot. "I called the cops, kid. Calm down. Who was out there?" "The guy in my walls," I said. I knew how it sounded. I sounded like a lunatic. "He was in my trunk." We stood there for 10 minutes, the clerk holding a baseball bat he'd pulled from under the counter, me pacing back and forth, watching the shadows stretch across the lot. Every car that passed on the highway made me jump. When the police arrived, a local sheriff's deputy, looking far more relaxed than Sergeant Miller had, I pointed immediately to my car. "He was in there," I told the deputy as we walked cautiously toward the vehicle. "I drove him here." The deputy shined his flashlight into the trunk. I expected to see a weapon, or a note, or maybe just the empty carpet. I wasn't prepared for the nest. The spare tire cover had been removed and tossed aside. Inside the wheel well, the space was lined with materials taken from my apartment, my dirty laundry, a stolen pillowcase, towels. It was arranged in a circle, a soft, horrific little bed. But it was the smell that hit me first. The trunk reeked of that same locker room stench I had smelled in the wall cavity, urine and sweat, concentrated in the small, airless space. "Jesus," the deputy muttered, covering his nose. "Someone rode in here?" "For 30 miles, I whispered. I felt sick. I realized that the thumping I had heard over the potholes, the slight drag of the car on the highway, it wasn't mechanical issues. It was the weight of a grown man curling up in the back of my Honda. "There's something written here," the deputy said, leaning in closer. He pointed his light at the underside of the trunk lid. Scratched into the gray felt liner, carved with something sharp like a key or a knife tip, were words. "Hotel California." "He's playing games," the deputy said, straightening up and scanning the darkness beyond the motel lights. "He's enjoying this." "Where did he go?" I asked, looking at the dense woods that bordered the motel property. "If he's on foot, he couldn't have gone far. But if he stole another car or hitched a ride—" He called for backup. They did a sweep of the grounds. They checked the dumpsters, the laundry room, the vending machine alcoves. They woke up half the guests in the motel. Nothing. He had vanished again, just like in the apartment. He was a ghost made of flesh and bone. I couldn't stay at the motel. The deputy offered to drive me to the station to give a statement, and I accepted. I wasn't going to spend another minute alone. We went back to my room to grab my bag. The door was still wide open from when I had fled. The room looked undisturbed.
I walked in to grab my duffel bag from the floor. I checked the contents. My clothes were there, my toiletries, but my laptop was gone. My computer, I said, panic rising again. He took my computer. The deputy sighed, pulling out his notepad. Okay, serial number, make, and model. You don't understand, I said, gripping the deputy's arm. It's not about the computer. It's what's on it. Bank info? Everything, I said. My email, my social media, my address book, my family's addresses. My passwords are saved in the browser. I looked at the empty spot on the floor where the bag had been. He hadn't just followed me to scare me. He hadn't just followed me to sleep in my trunk. He had followed me to upgrade his access. In the apartment, he was watching me physically. He was limited by the walls. He was limited by where he could drill a hole. Now he had my digital life. He didn't need to be in the walls anymore. He could be anywhere. He could be anyone. As if on cue, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an email notification. From my own email address. Subject, update. My hands shook so hard I could barely tap the screen. I opened the email. It was a single attachment, a video file. I clicked play. The video was shaky, handheld. It showed the interior of the sheriff's deputy's cruiser. The camera panned over the dashboard, the shotgun lock, the radio. Then it panned to the back seat. To me. I was sitting in the back of the cruiser, staring out the window, looking terrified. The video had been taken 5 minutes ago, while the deputy was searching the motel grounds. He hadn't run into the woods. He hadn't stolen a car. The camera panned up to the rearview mirror of the cruiser. In the reflection, I saw a pair of dark, wide eyes peering out from the gap between the plexiglass partition and the driver's seat. He was in the front seat of the police car.
I dropped the phone on the asphalt. It didn't shatter, but the screen cracked, a spiderweb fracture running right through the frozen image of the stalker's eyes in the rearview mirror. "He's in the car!" I screamed. I pointed a shaking finger at the cruiser. "He's inside the patrol car!" The deputy didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He dropped his hand to his holster, unsnapped the retention strap, and spun toward his vehicle. He moved with a sudden, jerky intensity, his flashlight beam cutting across the windshield. "Driver's side!" I yelled, backing away toward the motel lobby, my hands over my head. "He was in the front seat!" The deputy approached the car on the passenger side, weapon drawn, flashlight held high. "Sheriff's Department, show me your hands." Silence. The cruiser idled, the engine purring softly. The red and blue lights on the roof bar rotated lazily, washing the parking lot in a hypnotic, rhythmic strobe. The deputy yanked the passenger door open. He swept the interior with his weapon. "Clear right." He circled the back, keeping low, and ripped the driver's side door open. "Clear left." He stood up, looking baffled. He shined the light into the back seat, under the seats, even up at the ceiling liner. "There's nobody here," the deputy shouted back to me. "Car is clear." "Check the video," I ran over, picking up my cracked phone. I shoved it into his face, my thumb trembling as I hit play. "Look, he was right there. He was filming me while I was sitting in the back." The deputy watched the footage. I saw the color drain from his face under the harsh motel lights. He saw the dashboard. He saw the shotgun rack. He saw the undeniable reflection of the hollow-cheeked man in the mirror. He looked back at the cruiser. Then he leaned in and touched the driver's seat. "It's warm," he whispered. He looked at the floorboard on the driver's side. There, resting on the rubber mat, was a small, frantic scrawl in the dust, written with a finger. "Ride along." The deputy swore, a harsh sound that cracked the stillness of the night. He keyed his radio immediately. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I have a confirmed 1090 in my vehicle. Suspect has fled.
requesting immediate perimeter on the motel grounds. Canine unit required. Now. For the next hour, the motel turned into a fortress. More cops arrived. A dog barked, straining against its leash as it sniffed my car trunk, then the cruiser, then a trail that led into the woods behind the building. They found footprints, boot prints that matched the ones found in the dust of my apartment walls. They led into the dense pine forest and vanished at the edge of a creek. He knew exactly how to evade the dogs. I sat in the lobby, drinking stale coffee, wrapped in a shock blanket. I felt numb. The terror had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard realization. I was fighting a ghost. Around 3 a.m., Sergeant Miller, the officer from my apartment, walked in. He looked exhausted. He pulled up a chair opposite me. "We lost him," Miller said bluntly. "He went into the creek. We have units patrolling the highways, but if he doesn't want to be found, he won't be." "I told him that he took my laptop," I said. My voice sounded mechanical. "He has everything." "We're working on that," Miller said. "We've contacted cyber. We're trying to flag your accounts." "You don't understand. He's not stealing my credit card numbers. He's trying to be me." I pulled out my phone. It had been buzzing incessantly for the last 20 minutes. "Look," I showed Miller the screen. Password changed for Gmail, password changed for Instagram, password changed for Apple ID, recovery email changed. He's locking me out. He's systematically taking over my digital life. He's deleting me. Miller frowned. "We can subpoena the IP addresses, find out where he's logging in from. He's using a VPN, or he's using public Wi-Fi. He's smart, Miller. He lived in a wall for months without making a sound. Do you think he's going to leave a digital trail?" Miller rubbed his face. "We're taking you to a safe house, not a motel, a designated witness protection unit until we catch this guy. You'll be off the grid." "I need to call my mom," I said suddenly. The thought hit me like a physical blow. "He has my contacts. He knows where she lives." "Do it," Miller said. "Warn her." I dialed my mother's number. It was late, almost 4 a.m. She lived 2 towns over, a sweet woman who left her doors unlocked and thought the best of everyone. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. "Pick up. Please pick up." "Hello?" Her voice was groggy, thick with sleep. "Mom?" I almost shouted. "Mom, it's me. Listen to me very carefully. Lock your doors, turn on the alarm. Do not open the door for anyone." "What? Honey?" She sounded confused. "What's going on? You just emailed me." My blood froze. I what?" "You emailed me," she said, yawning. "About 10 minutes ago. I heard the notification ding on my iPad." "What did the email say, Mom?" "You said you were in trouble. You said you had a fight with your landlord and the police were involved, and you needed a place to crash for a few days. You said you were driving over now."
"Mom," I said, my voice trembling, "that wasn't me. I am with the police right now. That is the man who broke into my apartment. He is impersonating me." Silence on the other end. Then a sharp intake of breath. "He said he was driving over," she whispered. "Mom, is the alarm on?" "No, I left the back door unlocked for you, like I always do when you visit late." "Lock it!" I screamed. "Lock it now! Go to the bedroom and lock the door!" I heard the phone fumble. I heard her footsteps running across the hardwood floor. I heard the distinct click of a deadbolt sliding home. "I locked the back door," she panted. "I'm at the front door now. I'm locking it." "Good. Stay on the phone with me. Sergeant Miller is sending cars to your house right now. Mom, do not hang up." "I see a car," she whispered. My heart stopped. "What?" "There's a car pulling into the driveway. It looks like your car, honey. It's the Honda." "Mom, get away from the window."
"The lights are off," she said, her voice rising in panic. "It's just rolling up the driveway. The trunk is bouncing. It's open."
"Mom, hide. Go to the bathroom. Lock the door."
"He's getting out," she cried. "Oh, God, he looks like you. He's wearing your hoodie. He's walking to the porch."
"Mom!" I heard a heavy pounding on the wood of the door. Bang, bang, bang. Then a voice. It was muffled, coming through the door on her end, but I could hear it through the phone. It was pitching itself up, trying to sound normal, trying to sound like me. "Mom, it's me. Let me in. The cops are chasing me." It was a horrific mimicry. He had studied me. He had listened to me talk on the phone in my apartment for months. He knew my cadence. He knew my nicknames for her. "Don't listen to him," I yelled into the phone, tears streaming down my face. "That's not me." "Go away," my mother screamed at the door. "I have a gun. Go away." Silence. The pounding stopped. "Mom?" I asked.
"He stopped," she whispered. He's walking around the side of the house."
"To the back door?"
"No,"
she said, and her voice went cold.
"He's going to the trellis, the one under my bedroom window."
"Miller," I shouted at the sergeant, "he's climbing the trellis. He's trying to get to the second floor." Miller was already shouting into his radio, coordinating the units in the next town over. "ETA, 2 minutes. Tell her to barricade." "Mom, get out of the bedroom," I yelled. "He's coming for the window." I heard the sound of glass shattering, then a scream. Then the line went dead. The drive to my mother's house was a blur of siren wails and terrified silence. I sat in the back of Sergeant Miller's cruiser, a different cruiser this time, one that had been swept for intruders, gripping the door handle until my fingers cramped. Every time the radio crackled, my heart stopped, waiting for the officer on scene to announce a body count. "Perimeter secure," the radio finally spat out. "Suspect is gone. Victim is secured. She's shaken, but no physical injuries." I let out a breath that sounded more like a sob. She was alive. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked like a crime scene from a movie. Blue and red lights bounced off the white siding, illuminating the trellis that had been torn away from the wall. My Honda was parked on the lawn, the driver's door open, the engine still running. I didn't wait for Miller. I scrambled out of the car and ran toward the ambulance parked by the curb. My mom was sitting on the back bumper, wrapped in a heavy blanket, holding a cup of water with shaking hands. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She just started crying again. "He looked so much like you," she whispered into my shoulder as I hugged her. "In the dark, the silhouette, I almost opened the door." "I know, Mom. I'm so sorry." "He knew the dog's name," she said, pulling back to look at me, her eyes wide with horror. "He was at the bedroom door and he called for Buster. He said, 'Come here, Buster, it's me.' And the dog went to him, honey. He wagged his tail." A chill went down my spine. Buster was a rescue. He hated strangers. The man in the walls hadn't just studied me. He had studied how to disarm the things I loved. "Did he hurt you?" I asked, scanning her for injuries. "No," she said. "I locked myself in the master bath. He didn't try to get in. He broke the window, came into the bedroom, and then he just sat there." "Sat there?" I could hear him through the door. He wasn't looking for jewelry. He wasn't tossing the drawers. He sat on the bed. I heard him humming, and I heard the VCR turn on. I froze. The VCR? "The old one in the bedroom. We haven't used it in years." I turned to Miller. "I need to see the room." "It's a crime scene," Miller warned. "I need to see what he watched." We walked into the house. The living room was untouched. The kitchen was untouched.
but the hallway leading to the master bedroom felt colder than the rest of the house. The bedroom door was open. The window was shattered, glass littering the carpet. The wind blew the curtains inward, ghostly white flags surrendering to the night. The room hadn't been ransacked. The jewelry box on the dresser was closed. The cash my mom kept in the nightstand was still there. But the bookshelf, the one where Mom kept the family history, had been decimated. The photo albums were gone, all of them. The leather-bound ones from my childhood, the ones from high school, the graduation photos. I looked at the TV in the corner. The VCR was still powered on, the blue screen glowing with the static of a finished tape. I walked over and hit eject. The tape slid out. It was labeled Christmas 1998. I was 6 years old in that video. "I watched my childhood," I whispered. "He sat here while the police were coming and watched home movies." "Why?" Miller asked, looking around the room baffled. "Why steal photos and watch a tape? Why not take the jewelry?" "Because he's not a thief," I said, the realization settling in my stomach like lead. "He's an understudy. He's learning the role." I looked around the room again. There was a gap on the wall where a large framed photo of me and my dad used to hang. It was gone. Then I looked at the mirror above the dresser. He had left something. Taped to the glass was a single Polaroid. It was old, the edges yellowed. It was a picture of me as a baby being held by my mother in this very room. But he had written on it. In black permanent marker, he had drawn a circle around my baby face, and next to it he had written, "Reset." "He thinks he can replace me," my voice shaking. "He's taking my history so he can build a new version of me, a version that started over."
"We'll catch him," Miller said, though he sounded less convinced than before. "He's in a stolen car now. We have the plates. He can't run forever." "He's not running, Miller," I said. "He's looking for the next piece." "What piece?" "He has my current life, my laptop, my email. He has my past, the photos, the videos." I turned to Miller. "There's only one thing he doesn't have." "What's that?" "My future." My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank app. "Transaction alert, $400, withdrawal. Location, ATM, 4th Street. I stared at the screen. "He's back." "What?" "He's back at the apartment," I said. "The ATM on 4th Street is right around the corner from the building." Miller grabbed his radio. "All units, suspect is returning to the primary location. He's back at the apartment building." "Why would he go back?" Miller asked me as we ran back to the cruiser. "The place is a fortress of police tape right now." "Because he forgot something," I said. "Or he left something there for me to find." "For you?" "He knows I'm with you. He knows I'm tracking the alerts. He made that withdrawal so I would see it. He wants me to come back." We peeled out of the driveway, leaving my mother with a patrol unit. The drive back to the city was even faster than the drive out. I felt a sick, magnetic pull toward that apartment. It was the epicenter. It was the nest. When we arrived at the building on 4th Street, the street was quiet. The earlier chaos had died down. A single patrol car was parked out front, but it was empty. "Where's the unit?" Miller growled into his radio. "Unit 2 Bravo, report." Static. We got out of the car, guns drawn, Miller with his service weapon, me with nothing but a flashlight I'd grabbed from the glove box. The front door of the building was ajar. The lock had been picked. We entered the lobby. It was silent. The air smelled of old dust and that faint chemical sweetness of mothballs. "Stay behind me," whispered Miller. We walked up the stairs. 1st floor, 2nd floor, 3rd floor.
The door to Unit Floor B was covered in yellow police tape, but the tape had been cut. It fluttered in the draft coming from inside the apartment. The door was standing wide open. Miller signaled for me to wait, but I couldn't. I needed to see. We stepped into the apartment. It was dark, illuminated only by the streetlights outside. The place had been changed. In the few hours we had been gone, someone had been busy. The furniture, my furniture, had been rearranged. The couch was moved to the center of the room. The chairs were set up in a circle, facing the couch. And sitting on the couch, illuminated by the glow of my stolen laptop, which sat open on the coffee table, was a mannequin. It was a dressmaker's dummy, probably stolen from the basement storage. It was wearing my hoodie. It was wearing my jeans. A picture of my face, cut from one of the stolen albums, was taped to the head. It was a grotesque effigy of me. And on the laptop screen, a video was playing on a loop. It was a live feed. I squinted at the screen. It showed a dark, cramped space, brick walls, a sleeping bag. "That's the wall cavity," I whispered. "He's in there right now." Miller raised his gun, aiming it at the bedroom door. "No," I said, pointing at the screen. "Look at the timestamp." It wasn't a live feed of the wall in this apartment. The bricks in the video were different. They were newer. There was insulation. And in the corner of the video frame, resting on the sleeping bag, was a newspaper. The Daily Gazette, today's date. I zoomed in on the video with my eyes. I recognized the layout of the pipes in the background. I recognized the specific brand of insulation. I felt the blood drain from my face until I was dizzy. "He's not in this apartment," I said. Miller looked at me. "Then where is that?" "I know that insulation," I whispered. "I saw it yesterday." "Where?" "When I checked into the motel," I said. "They were doing renovations in the room next to mine, Unit 105. The video on the screen shifted. The camera was picked up. The view spun around. It showed the back of a painting. Then the camera pushed through a small hole in the drywall. It looked out into a motel room. There was a bed. There was a barricaded door. And there was a bag on the floor. My bag. The one I had left behind when I ran to the lobby. "He went back to the motel," I said. "He didn't run away. He went back to the room I rented." Then a voice came through the laptop speakers. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was loud and clear and triumphant. "I'm ready for bed. Are you?"
The 30-mile drive back to the motel felt less like a police escort and more like a funeral procession. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the break-in at my mother's house and the discovery of the effigy in my apartment was beginning to curdle into a sick, heavy dread. Miller was driving with a focused, terrifying intensity. He was on the radio constantly, coordinating with the state troopers and the local sheriff's department. "Containment is key," Miller barked into the handset. "He's in the structure. Do not let him flush. If he gets into the woods again, we lose him." "He's not going to the woods," I said, staring out the window at the passing highway lights. "He's done running. He set the stage." Miller glanced at me. "What do you mean?" "The apartment, the mannequin, the video feed. He wanted me to see him in the motel. He's inviting us in." "Then he's making a mistake," Miller said, his grip tightening on the wheel, "because we're bringing the hammer." When we pulled into the Motel 6, the scene was apocalyptic. The buzzing neon sign had been turned off to reduce glare. Portable floodlights bathed the building in stark white illumination. Heavily armed officers in tactical gear were crouched behind cruisers, their rifles trained on the block of rooms. The manager, the guy with the mustache, was standing by the perimeter tape, looking pale. "Room 105, a deputy briefed Miller as we got out. "Renovation unit. The door is barricaded from the inside. We have thermal on the walls.
We picked up a heat signature in the partition between 104 and 105. "Is he moving?" Miller asked. "No, sir. He's stationary. He's waiting." Miller turned to me. "Stay here, behind the line." "No," I said. The fear was still there, churning in my gut, but underneath it was a cold, hard rage. This man had violated my home, terrified my mother, and stolen my history. I need to see him. I need to know it's him. Miller hesitated, then nodded. "Vest up. Stay behind the shield." They put a heavy Kevlar vest on me. It smelled of sweat and old Velcro. I followed Miller and a team of 4 SWAT officers toward the door of room 105. The room was dark. The window was covered in newspaper, likely taped up by the renovation crew, or maybe by him. "Breaching," the lead officer whispered into his headset. They didn't knock. A battering ram slammed into the door near the lock. Wood splintered with the sound like a gunshot. The door swung open. "Police! Get down! Get down!" The shout was deafening. Flashlight beams cut through the dusty air of the room. Room 105 was a shell. The carpet was ripped up, exposing concrete. The drywall had been torn down on 2 sides, revealing the wooden skeleton of the building. But the wall shared with room 104, my room, was intact. Or it looked intact. The officers swept the room. It was empty. No gunman in the corner. No ambush. "Clear." "The target is in the wall," the deputy with the thermal scanner said, pointing at the shared partition. "Heat signature is right there, chest height." Miller approached the wall. He drew his service weapon. "Come out. There's nowhere to go. We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands first." Silence. Then a sound. Scratch, scratch. It was the same sound I'd heard on the webcam footage, the sound of metal on plaster. "He's cutting," one of the officers said. About 4 feet up the wall, a section of the drywall began to bulge. A saw blade, a small, jagged keyhole saw, punched through the paint. It began to carve a crude circle. The officers raised their rifles. "Drop the weapon! Drop it!" The sawing stopped. The blade withdrew. Then a fist smashed through the weakened circle of drywall. Plaster dust exploded into the room. A hand reached out, gripping the edge of the hole, and pulled. A large chunk of the wall fell away, crashing onto the concrete floor. A face appeared in the hole. It was him. Seeing him in person, lit by the harsh tactical lights, was infinitely worse than seeing him on a grainy screen. He was gaunt, his cheekbones threatening to tear through his skin. His eyes were wide, rimmed with red, and they were locked onto me. He wasn't looking at the guns. He wasn't looking at Miller. He was looking right at me, ignoring the laser sights dancing on his forehead. He was wearing my clothes. The hoodie was stained with drywall dust. He had shaved his head to match my haircut, though he had done it poorly, leaving patches of scalp raw and bleeding. "You came back," he croaked. His voice was ruined, raspy from inhaling insulation and dust. "Step out of the wall," Miller yelled. "Show me your hands." He held up his hands. In one, he held my stolen smartphone. In the other, he held the old Android he used for recording. "I'm almost done," the man said to me, a terrifyingly serene smile spreading across his face. "I just needed the voice. I have the look. I have the history. I just needed to hear you scream one more time to get the pitch right." "Who are you?" I asked. My voice felt small in the chaotic room. "I'm the tenant," he said simply. "I'm the one who appreciates the space. You were just passing through.
You were empty. I filled the rooms. "Get him out," Miller ordered. 2 officers moved forward to grab him, to drag him out of the wall cavity. "Wait," the man whispered. He looked down at the phone in his hand. "Upload complete." He tapped the screen. Suddenly, a sound erupted from the phone. It was loud, amplified by the acoustics of the hollow wall. It was my voice. But it wasn't me speaking. It was a recording, a montage. "Hello? Is someone there? Mom, lock the door. He's in the walls. I need to see him." He had remixed my panic. He had spliced together every terrified utterance I had made over the last week. And then, underneath the recording, a new sound started, a low electronic hum. "I didn't just take your photos," he said, his eyes gleaming with mania. "I took your cloud. I took your backups. I deleted them." "Grab him!" Miller shouted. The officers lunged. They grabbed his arms and hauled him through the hole in the drywall. He didn't fight. He went limp, like a rag doll, laughing wheezily as he was dragged over the jagged plaster. He crashed onto the concrete floor of room 105. Officers swarmed him, knees in his back, zip ties cinching his wrists. "You have the right to remain silent," Miller was reciting the Miranda rights, his voice shaking with adrenaline. The man wasn't listening. He twisted his head against the concrete, pressing his cheek into the dust so he could look at me one last time. "It doesn't matter," he whispered. "I sent it." "Sent what?" I demanded, stepping closer despite Miller's warning hand. "What did you send?" He grinned, revealing teeth that were gray and rotting. "The application," he said, "to your job, to your landlord, to your friends. I resigned. I broke the lease. I told them exactly what I think of them. I burned it down, Ethan. I burned your life down so we could start fresh." My stomach dropped. "My name isn't Ethan." His smile faltered for a second, then widened. "It is now. That's the name on the passport I found in your drawer, the one you never use." He started laughing again, a high, broken sound that echoed off the bare studs of the room. "Get him out of here," Miller roared. They hauled him up. He couldn't walk. His legs had atrophied from crouching in small spaces for so long. They had to drag him, his feet trailing through the dust. As they pushed him through the doorway, past the line of stunned deputies, he locked eyes with me one last time. "Check the vents," he mouthed. And then he was gone, shoved into the back of a squad car. I stood in the ruined shell of room 105, surrounded by the debris of the wall. I felt cold. I felt hollow. "It's over," Miller said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "We got him. He's going away for a long time. Burglary, stalking, identity theft, assault. He's done." "He said he sent emails," I said, pulling out my phone. I checked my inbox. It was empty. I checked my sent folder. It was full. Hundreds of emails, sent in the last 10 minutes while we were breaching the door. To my boss, a stream of profanity and resignation. To my landlord, a confession to cooking meth in the unit. To my ex-girlfriend, a terrifying, rambling manifesto. He hadn't just watched me. He had weaponized my identity to destroy my social standing. He had ensured that I would have no job, no apartment, and no friends to go back to. "He nuked my life," I whispered. "We can fix this," Miller said, though he looked horrified at the screen. "We'll issue a police statement. We'll explain it was a hacker. It will take time, but we can fix this." "Can we?" I looked at the hole in the wall, the dark, jagged mouth where he had been living. I shone my flashlight into the cavity just to be sure, just to see the nest one last time. The beam hit the insulation, it hit the studs, and then it hit the back of the mirror that faced into room 104. Written on the back of the mirror in thick black marker was a message. It wasn't written in the frantic scrawl of the addict or the jagged letters of the stalker. It was written in my handwriting, perfect cursive, an exact replica of my own hand. Part 1 complete. I stared at the words. "Miller," I said, my voice trembling. "What is it?" "He said Part 1. I looked deeper into the wall cavity, past the mirror, down toward the floor plate. There was a vent shaft there, leading down into the crawl space under the motel. The grate had been removed, and resting on the edge of the shaft was a second sleeping bag, a second set of wrappers. "Miller," I said, backing away from the wall, "there are 2 sleeping bags." Miller froze. "What?" "The video," I said, my mind racing back to the footage of the man coming out of the vent in my apartment. "The camera angle, it was high, it was steady. Yeah, he had a tripod." "No," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. In the first video, both of his hands were visible. He was climbing out of the vent. I looked at Miller, terror seizing my throat. Who was holding the camera?
Who was holding the camera? The question hung in the dusty, ruined air of room 105 like the smoke from a gunshot. Sergeant Miller stared at me, his eyes widening as the implications sank in. He keyed his radio, his voice cracking with a sudden, desperate urgency. "Perimeter, we have a secondary suspect. Unknown description. Seal the exits. Nobody leaves the property." But even as the sirens wailed and the deputies began to scramble to check the trunks of cars and the IDs of motel guests, I knew it was too late. The second sleeping bag in the wall cavity wasn't warm. The dust on the second set of wrappers had settled. While the actor, the man they had just dragged away, had been making noise, sawing through the drywall and drawing our attention, the director had slipped away. The chaos of the raid had been the perfect cover. We had been watching the puppet while the puppet master walked out the back door. Miller and I climbed back through the hole into the renovation unit. I needed to see the second nest. I needed to understand the dynamic of the monsters that had been living in my periphery. The second space was different. Where the actor's side was filthy, cluttered with trash and crude drawings, this side was clinical. The sleeping bag was rolled tight, military style. There were no food wrappers, only empty protein bar wrappers, stacked neatly. And there was equipment. Mounts. Tripods clamp-mounted to the studs. A high-end shotgun microphone rigged to point through a vent. This wasn't the setup of a squatter. This was the setup of a production crew. "Look at this," Miller said, shining his light on a clipboard hanging from a nail. I leaned in. It was a production log. Day 42, sleeping patterns irregular. Day 45, subject noticed the milk. Gaslighting phase initiated. Day 50, subject acquired camera. Narrative shift. Narrative shift, I read aloud, my stomach turning. They adjusted the script when I bought the laptop. They wanted me to catch them. "It's a game," Miller spat, ripping the clipboard off the wall. "Sick freaks playing a game." "No," I said, looking at the neatly drilled pier holes that offered a panoramic view of my motel room. "It's not a game. It's a show." We found the final piece of evidence tucked behind a structural beam. It was an SD card, taped to the wood with blue painter's tape. Written on the tape in that same perfect mimicry of my handwriting was B-roll. Miller confiscated it immediately, but later, during the debriefing at the station, he let me watch it. He shouldn't have, but I think he knew I wouldn't stop screaming until I saw it. The footage was high definition, stable. It was shot from the perspective of the second person, the director. It showed the actor climbing out of the vent in my apartment. It showed the actor sleeping in my trunk. But then the camera turned. It showed me. It showed me sleeping in the motel room, filmed from the vent I had failed to check. I looked peaceful, unaware that 2 feet away a lens was capturing every breath.
Then a hand came into the frame. The director's hand. It was wearing a black glove. It held up a piece of paper in front of the lens, superimposing it over my sleeping face. The paper read, "End of Season 1." The investigation that followed was exhaustive and fruitless. The man they arrested, a drifter with no fingerprints on file and a history of psychiatric hold, never spoke. He just smiled. He hummed static. He refused to give up a name, a partner, or a motive. He was committed to the role until the end. As for the director, a ghost. No DNA, no prints. The footprints in the woods that led to the creek were the only trace, and they washed away with the morning tide. My life, as predicted, was incinerated. The emails the actor sent were effective. I was fired from my job for gross misconduct. My landlord sued me for the damage to the unit and the illegal activities I had confessed to in the hacked emails. My friends, disturbed by the manifesto sent from my account, distanced themselves. Even after the police report cleared my name, the stigma lingered. I was the guy who attracted monsters. I was the guy who brought the darkness with him. I moved. I didn't just move neighborhoods, I moved states. I went to the Midwest. I found a small house on a slab foundation, no basement, single story, no attic. I renovated it myself. I tore down the drywall to the studs just to check, then replaced it with clear plexiglass in the closets so I could always see what was behind them. I replaced the vents with flat, perforated steel plates that are welded to the frames. Nothing bigger than a fly can get in or out. I don't have Wi-Fi. I don't have a smartphone. I'm typing this on an old desktop computer at a library 3 towns over, and I'm wearing gloves so I don't leave prints on the keyboard. It's been 3 years. I haven't heard a scratch. I haven't seen a misplaced key. I haven't smelled that locker room stench. But I know it's not over. Last week, I received a package in my P.O. box. It had no return address. Inside was a DVD case. The cover art was a high-resolution photo of me taken through the window of this library, typing on this very computer. I didn't watch the DVD. I smashed it. I burned the pieces. But I couldn't burn the note that came with it. It was written in my handwriting again, perfect, indistinguishable. Season 2 is testing well with audiences. They love the new location. I'm writing this story not to entertain you. I'm writing it as a warning. If you live in an old building, check the vents. If you hear breathing, don't assume it's the wind. And if you ever feel like you're being watched, don't look for the monster under the bed. Look for the camera. Because the scary part isn't that someone is living in your walls. The scary part is that someone else is paying to watch them do it. And right now, as you sit there reading this on your screen, in the safety of your room, ask yourself one question. Are you the audience, or are you the next episode?